Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. With the election coming up November 3rd, the next time Biden and Trump have to reach the voters is not only during the campaign steps that they'll do, but also during the presidential debates. And President Trump is looking forward to the first presidential debate, hoping to set the narrative against Biden. This coming from thehill.com. Trump campaign looks to set narrative ahead of pivotal debates with Biden. The Trump campaign is already looking forward to the first presidential debate at the end of the month, eyeing the one-on-one format with Democrat nominee Joe Biden as the best remaining choice to sway voters toward the president. Trump and Biden will square off for the first time on September 29 in Cleveland. The pandemic-altered campaign season, which has left the candidates with fewer opportunities to meet voters face-to-face, has put an even greater emphasis on the debates. Even after getting a slight boost after the Republican National Convention, Trump still trails Biden in the polls by a healthy margin nationally and by a few percentage points in most battleground states. Trump will likely need a strong performance in the debates to reassure wavering independents and Republicans. He is certainly tightening and coming back, and the debates this time will be more important than ever because there aren't rallies, said Sam Nunberg, an advisor to Trump's 2016 campaign. I believe there will be more watched because more people are staying home. The Trump campaign has been aggressive about setting expectations and lobbying for changes to the debates that they believe work in their favor. Trump had previously criticized the Commission on Presidential Debates, accusing the nonprofit bipartisan group of bias and raising questions about whether he will participate in the 2020 debates. But Trump's campaign, seizing on comments from Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat California, and opinion columnists in the media who have argued Biden should avoid the debates, have attempted to sow doubt about whether the former vice president will show up. Trump campaign communications director Tim Murtaugh suggested to voters on Wednesday that any last-minute change in venue due to the pandemic could allow Biden to retreat to his remote video link and Skype call campaign that he's running and do the debate from his basement, where he can rely on notes, a teleprompter, or a handler behind the camera. Biden has committed to the debates and repeatedly said in recent days that he looks forward to going head-to-head with Trump. I've begun to prepare by going over what the president has said and the multiple lies he's told, Biden told a rare news conference. Biden said during a rare news conference Thursday, musing about the benefits of having a live fact checker on the screen during the debates. I'm looking forward to debating the president, and I'm going to lay out as clearly as I can what I think we have to do to bring this country back, he added. The Trump campaign has made other overtures to the Commission on Presidential Debates, requested a fourth debate, and advocated for an early event before mail-in ballots are sent out. Rudy Giuliani, writing on behalf of the campaign, also provided 24 recommended moderators who would satisfy the president. Experts have equated these appeals as an attempt to work the refs, but they've all been rejected. The commission has said it would only add another debate if both sides agree to do so, and when the 3 moderators were approved this week, none were among the Trump campaign's pre-approved list. Much of the campaign's Messaging efforts around the debates have been focused on Biden in particular. Trump, when asked earlier this month what Biden brings as a debater, replied that the former vice president is shot. He told reporters this week his opponent doesn't have a clue. The Trump campaign's digital campaign has become hyper-efficient at cutting and editing clips of Biden stumbling over his words and portraying him as a bumbling candidate who has mentally declined. The unusual strategy has lowered expectations for Biden, 77, who won positive reviews for delivering his speech at the Democratic National Convention without issue. The Trump folks have from the get-go been violating all the rules we know about, but is successful with setting expectations, and that is to lower them for yourself and raise them for your opponent, said Mitchell McKinney, director for the Political Communication Institute at the University of Missouri. There is pressure on Trump to perform based on the way he has talked up his physical and mental abilities compared to Biden, but McKinney noted that incumbents have a history of stumbling out of the gate in their first debates, pointing to then-President Obama in 2012 and George W. Bush in 2004. The president is not known for being a disciplined messenger or a rigorous study. Asked last month about debate prep, Trump only mentioned to Fox and Friends that he had watched Biden's performance in the Democrat primary debates. If you ask the president, he'd say he's preparing for the debates by running the country as president, Murtaugh said Wednesday, reasoning that Trump's record will be a focus of his debate messaging. I don't know that any actual debate prep has occurred to this point, and I don't know what the plans are to begin that. While Biden still maintains a sizable lead in national polls, the race has tightened according to some recent surveys. A Quinnipiac University survey published Wednesday showed Biden holding a 10-point lead nationally, but a Monmouth University poll had Trump's deficit falling within the margin of error. The electorate is heavily polarized, experts noted, leaving only a small section of persuadable voters. The debates could represent a final opportunity in the closing weeks of the campaign for either candidate to reassure nervous supporters or convince undecided Americans before casting their ballot. Will he be ready? Will he be disciplined? Or will he approach the debates as another one of his press conference with a sort of stream of consciousness, McKinney said. All of this attention on Joe Biden, and will he be up for it? How will the president perform in these debates? Will the president's performance be at a level where it might reassure some of these wavering individuals? It's going to be interesting to see how just what's going to happen. I mean, there's the vice presidential debate coming up and coming up about a week later on October 7th, and then you have October 15th and October 22nd for the other two presidential debates. As a matter of fact, we have just an article set last week from the Hill as well, and it's entitled Moderators Announced for Presidential Debates. The presidential debates between President Trump and Democrat nominee Joe Biden will be moderated by journalists from Fox News, C-SPAN, and NBC, with CNN being shut out of the debates for the first time since 2008, the Commission on Presidential Debates announced Wednesday. Fox News Channel's Chris Wallace, who has angered some Republicans for his pointed questioning of Trump and White House officials, will moderate the first presidential debate in Cleveland, Ohio on September 29. The second debate, which will be town hall style, will be moderated by C-SPAN's Steve Scully in Miami on October 5th, and Scully tweeted out, 4 years ago, I had the honor of serving as a backup moderator for the at debates, 3 presidential and 1 VP. This year, it is a privilege to moderate the second debate at the Adrienne Irish Center in Miami. The third and final debate will be moderated by Kristen Walker of NBC and will take place in Nashville on October 22nd. There will be one vice presidential debate between Vice President Pence and Senator Kamala Harris, Democrat California, which will be moderated by USA Today's Susan Page and will take place in Salt Lake City, Utah on October 7. We're grateful to these experienced journalists who will help ensure that the general election presidential debates continue to serve the unique educational purpose of helping the public learn about the candidates, the Commission said in a statement. Each individual brings great professionalism to moderating and understands that the purpose of the 2020 debate formats is to facilitate in-depth discussion of major topics. The Trump campaign has been pressuring the Commission to add an additional debate earlier in September, saying that voters casting their ballots earlier than usual through the mail because of the coronavirus should hear from the candidates before they vote. The Biden campaign has said it would only commit to the originally agreed on 3 debates. Trump advisor Rudy Giuliani also sought to pressure the Commission to choose from a list of moderators he believed would be unbiased. None of Giuliani's suggestions made the final cut. However, the Commission did not select any moderators from CNN, which has clashed with Trump and been the target of his attacks. CNN's Anderson Cooper moderated a 2016 debate between Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton, and in 2012, CNN's Candy Crowley infuriated Republicans by correcting one of Republican nominee Mitt Romney's claims in real time. Crowley said later that Romney was right in the main, but picked the wrong word. Conservatives will be closely following Wallace's moderation of the first debate. He also moderated a 2016 debate between Trump and Clinton. Wallace has angered some on the right, who believe he has been too hard on Trump and the Republicans. He was praised by many in the mainstream media for his combative interview of Trump earlier this month. Now, interestingly enough, Joe Biden has not been on any news shows, and Chris Wallace had mentioned that he reached out to the former vice president for an interview and had not gotten any answer. This might be his chance to see just how he goes after Joe Biden as well. As far as the other candidates, or rather the other debates and moderators, I'm looking forward to seeing C-SPAN Steve Scully. C-SPAN is mostly nonpartisan, right down the middle. As a matter of fact, C-SPAN 1 has the House from gavel to gavel, and C-SPAN 2 has the Senate gavel to gavel as well. So C-SPAN is pretty much right down the middle, except for their call-ins, but that's par for the course. So we're just under 2 months until the debate, or until the election, and keep it right here for more information. Six years ago, on September 6th, an investigative reporter who was going to be an editor for Professor William Jacobson's Legal Insurrection, suffered a stroke, and she's feeling a lot better. She's getting somewhat better. There's an article from Legal Insurrection. Professor Bill Jacobson. Update Mandy Nagy 6 years later. At 8:42 on Sunday, September 7, 2014, I received an email at our contact email address with an email account I did not recognize, with the subject line Mandy Nagy. Professor Jacobson, I hope this email is directed to you and not Mandy. I am Mandy's mother. Mandy is in the hospital. She suffered a stroke early Saturday morning. She is unable to speak and cannot move the right side of her body. If you'd like to contact me, I can be reached at phone number redacted. I'm also going to her home and look on her computer to see if I can find her contact information. Jenny Nagy Ashrafi. In that moment, it made sense. The day before, I had emailed Mandy to walk through her start the following Monday, September 8th, as Legal Insurrection's first-time employee and editor, but she didn't respond. That was very unlike her. Since she joined us as a regular author in June 2013, Mandy had taken on an increasingly important role in running the website, such that it was reasonable for Mandy's mother to assume our quote-unquote contact email address might have gone to Mandy, not to me. I spoke immediately to Mandy's mom and found out just how bad the situation was, particularly devastating since Mandy was just 45 years old. Later that day, I alerted the readership. Pray for Mandy Nagy. A beloved Mandy Nagy, also known as Liberty Chick, had a stroke yesterday and brain surgery to relieve the pressure today. I am in touch with Mandy's mom, who proved me letting people know via Legal Insurrection. Before Monday, Mandy also was able to nod approval with a small smile, her mom tells me. We're praying for Mandy and keeping her seat at Legal Insurrection warm, awaiting her return, however long it takes. And there are 3 tweets. One tweet from the Hating Breitbart movie Twitter. Close friend of Andrew Breitbart, Mandy Nagy has suffered a stroke. Please pray for her. Then from Lee Stranahan, this sort of detailed research-based investigative journalism is why Breitbart loved and respected Mandy Nagy so much. And Tammy Bruce said, in our fight promoting the good, Mandy Nagy at Liberty Chick is one of the heroes. Join me praying for her recovery. It was not to be. Mandy never returned to Legal Insurrection, and never will, though her seat is still being kept warm. Each year we have updated Mandy's condition as reported to us by her mom. Mandy Nagy 1 year later. It's been just over 1 year, 9/6/14, since Mandy had her stroke. In the first few months, she went from being unconscious to opening her eyes every now and then. She was missing the left side of her skull for 4 months, was deaf and blind on her right side, and had a feeding tube for several months. She was bedridden for 2 months. After about 6 months of rehab, she is recovered enough to walk small distances by herself with a cane, but no other assistance. She is still paralyzed partially on her right side. She has no use of her right arm, but her right leg is functioning enough to walk a little. She spends much of her day in a wheelchair. She seems to be able to hear and see again on her right side. Her speech has improved slightly. She can say a few words, and I'm teaching her to speak in sentences. I have tried to get her interested in using the internet and email again, but have been unsuccessful. She is very slowly learning to do simple everyday tasks on her own. Over the years, she has had to learn how to do things we learned as children, such as using utensils to eat or brush teeth. I have to reprint to her since she only recognizes and knows the meaning of some words. However, she understands most of what I am saying to her. Mandy, Victor, and I are very grateful to all the people who have donated and sent good wishes over the past year. It's incredible to me that she knows so many people that care. Update, Mandy Nagy 2 years later. Mandy still needs help with cooking, bathing, dressing, walking, cooking, etc. She can only speak and read a few words. She mainly identifies things by pictures. She wears a brace on her right leg and needs spotting while walking short distances. Her right arm is paralyzed and her right leg is partially paralyzed. She is very disabled. I do my best to take care of her needs. She seems content and not depressed. Update Mandy Nagy 3 years later. It's been 3 years and a very challenging time for Mandy, Victor, and me. Her situation for now is stable. Her condition has stayed the same for the past year. She can walk very slowly for short distances with a cane. She has no use of her right arm and very little of her right leg. She needs assistance every day with bathing, dressing, cleaning, and meal preparation. She cannot form words except for no, hi, okay, and a few other words. She can read and still doesn't understand things she should. People she should know, she doesn't, unless I show her a picture of them. She doesn't understand instructions. I give her a brush to use in the shower, and she didn't know what it was or what to do with it. Even after I showed her how to use it, she just stared at it confused. So this is where we are. It is a sad situation, but she is comfortable and hopefully content. It's not a very good life, but it is life. Manny Nagy, 4 years later. I hope you and your family are well. Thank you again for thinking of Mandy. Not much has changed. She was hospitalized once a few months ago. We thought she had another stroke, but it was a seizure. She still has a maid assisting her each day and I fill in on Sundays, holidays, and days when the aide is not available. Her only improvement occurred about 6 months ago when she became interested in the music playing on my iPhone. It always puzzled her family that she lost interest in music after the stroke, since music was such an important part of her life. Anyway, I downloaded music she likes on her iPad. She can't read who the artist is, but she can identify the photo of the artist. So now she listens to music often. Her doctors had said that music is good for recovery. It took 4 years, but better late than never. I'll let Manny know you asked about her. Update Manny Nagy 5 years later. Hi, Bill. Thank you for thinking of Mandy each year. Mandy's condition remains pretty much the same except her ability to walk is decreasing. Since her right side is paralyzed with some feeling in that leg, she needs more support than previously to walk. Despite our efforts to get her up and exercising, she now depends on a wheelchair more often than before. I used to be able to transport her from her place to mine using a cane, but now she needs to use her chair and I need another person to help with getting her up a few steps, whereas before I could get her up the steps by myself. However, she says she seems to be a bit sharper in her thinking. Although she still cannot talk, except for a few words, she is now remembering some small things that she hadn't before. For instance, she remembered that it is her brother's birthday. I was surprised. She seems content and not depressed. It's hard for us to see how that can be, but it is. She listens to music on her iPad and watches HGTV much of the day. A home health aide comes every day to take care of her, and I fill in on Sundays and holidays. Again, it is kind of you to remember her. I hope you and your family are well. Regards, Jenny. P.S. I saw your interview on Fox a while ago. I think it was with Tucker Carlson. Most recent update. A few days ago, I received this update from Mandy's mom. Bill, once again, thank you for thinking of Mandy each year at this time. Her condition has changed in a few different ways. Physically, she has more trouble walking. Her right side is paralyzed except for enough feeling in her right leg to make it possible to walk. In the past year, that feeling has diminished, making walking more unstable. Cognitively, she seems better. She has learned to understand and read a few words on paper. She also has become more interested in the internet. And when I bring up politics and the sad state the country is in, she seems to understand. She's aware of how President Trump supporters are attacked by the Democrat media and politicians get away with most anything. I called her one night and said you were a guest on Tucker Carlson and told her to watch. She and I have also seen you on other shows. I think Fox and Friends. She remembers you. Mandy's sister and I now realize how Mandy knew about the groups financed by people like George Soros. We didn't understand back then, but we are amazed how much she knew before the rest of us. I am sorry you have to go through what you are experiencing. It shouldn't be this way. I hope this country sees what many of us see and stop the madness. Anyway, I'm encouraging her to get involved again and look at the news on the internet and TV because for years she had no interest. She still needs someone to care for her every day. Her spirits are up and she seems content. I see her on Sundays, and this past Sunday when she walked in, she was watching the video below on her iPad. I was surprised because she didn't know how to spell, but apparently she is slowly learning. I asked her if her roommate pulled that up for her, and she said no, she did. I suppose she knows how to spell her name, and that's how she was able to find this. It is also an indication that she is interested once again in politics and wants to learn what was and presently happening. Regards, Jenny. Mandy's mom included this video of Mandy at BlogCon 2013, where she recently found Mandy watching a cherished memory for and of Mandy. And I have the link, and the video is in the article, and I'm parking the video in the description below. I bring this up for the simple reason that I follow Mandy Nagy on Twitter, and her Twitter account is at Liberty Chick. I'll drop that in the description below if you want to follow her, and also see just what type of research she had done before her stroke. Her last tweet was September 3rd, 2014. So just a few days before her stroke. And just looking through it, Ponzi schemer admits role in multi-million-dollar Facebook scam. Teen sues after being told by DMV he can't wear makeup in license photo. And college insurrection. Mandy retweeted college insurrection, which is a part of legal insurrection. On the follow Friday, our writers from college insurrection and legal insurrection. Liberty Chick is one of them, along with A. Branco, the famous political cartoonist. And there was a thing about CBS being sued over a fighting hippo. And she said that every time she browses Twitter, it's 90% tweets from people just basically screaming you're stupid at each other in about 1,000 different ways. So like I said, I'll drop the Twitter link in the description below if you want to take a look at it. I myself had not talked with her. However, I had read some of her articles, which is why I followed her on Twitter. And she's good people, just see. And she was a very good friend of Andrew Breitbart. As a matter of fact, in the Occupy en Masse video, Mandy Nagy, I think, was highlighted it in there. So if you will, make sure you watch Occupy en Masse and check that out. I know I'm going to be praying for her, and I know that others are as well. Keep up the good work, Mandy. As I've said many times on this show, anything can and will happen. And how is it going to happen? Well, we have the vote to 270 electoral votes for Trump and Biden. This coming from the Associated Press Newswire. Trump, Biden, and the vote to 270 electoral votes. For such a volatile year, the White House race between President Donald Trump and Democrat challenger Joe Biden has been remarkably consistent. With election day just 8 weeks away, Biden is maintaining the same comfortable lead in most national polls. Through the summer, he also has an advantage, though narrower, In many of the battleground states that will decide the election, Trump remains in striking distance, banking on the intensity of most loyal supporters and the hope that disillusioned Republicans ultimately swing his way. Still, both parties are braced for the prospect of sudden changes ahead, particularly as Trump makes an aggressive pitch to white suburban voters focused on safety and fear of violent unrest. It's unclear how well his rhetoric will resonate, but Democrats insist it can't be ignored, especially in the upper Midwest. That's especially true in Minnesota, a state that hasn't voted for a Republican presidential candidate since 1972. Democrats there say they're increasingly concerned that the state is genuinely in play this year. Trump can win Minnesota, said Representative Dean Phillips, who in 2018 became the first Democrat to win his suburban Minneapolis district since 1960. It's real. It's absolutely real. Now, while Trump's campaign is touting a play for Minnesota as a way to expand the electoral map, the president is playing defense in a host of the other battleground states he needs in order to secure the 270 electoral college votes to keep the White House. Biden's campaign is laser focused on the states in the Midwest and close by that Trump flipped in 2016, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and is also making a robust play for Arizona, a state that hasn't backed a Democratic presidential candidate since 1996. Biden is also redoubling his focus in Florida, the biggest prize among the perennial battlegrounds, and a state that would virtually block Trump's reelection if it swings Democrat. Biden's allies hope the devastating toll of the pandemic would put them in a strong position there, but a poll released on Tuesday found voters were closely divided. Senator Kamala Harris, Biden's running mate, will make the campaign's first in-person appearance in Florida on Thursday. And beyond Florida, recent polls suggest close races in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, while a Fox News poll conducted after the recent national conventions gave Biden an advantage in Wisconsin. Polls conducted earlier in the summer also suggested a Biden lead in Michigan, and another post-convention Fox News poll found a Biden advantage in Arizona. Still, polls that show competitive races or even Democrat advantages in traditionally Republican states proved to be false indicators for Democrats in 2016. Biden's aides are bullish about competing on a broad map that includes multiple states Trump won in 2016, including Florida, Arizona, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. There's a number of combinations that will allow us to get where we need to go and get over the 270 hump. Jennifer O'Malley Dillon, Biden's campaign manager, told reporters last week. But Trump has some important organizational advantages. The campaigns will match each other almost dollar for dollar on television advertising nationwide through Election Day. Each side has reserved $149 million ads, or $149 million in TV ads. But the money isn't distributed evenly, according to the ad tracking firm Kantar CMAG. Now, in Minnesota, for example, Trump is scheduled to spend 4 times as much as Biden. Trump has been far more willing to invest his time with swing state voters on the campaign trail. His rally last month in Mankato was his 5th appearance in Minnesota since taking office. He was in both Florida and North Carolina on Tuesday. And while Biden resumed in-person campaigning last week after months of avoiding significant travel because of the pandemic, Trump is expected to embrace a much more aggressive campaign schedule than Biden in the coming weeks. Republicans claim another practical advantage on the ground: people. Trump's team has thousands of paid staff and volunteers across the country courting voters face-to-face, while Democrats are conducting their canvassing efforts almost exclusively by phone and online. White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows claims increased momentum last week aboard Air Force One as Trump was returning to Washington from a rally in Pennsylvania that drew thousands despite public health concerns. Meadows said, "It just continues to build bigger and bigger each time we go. Minnesota or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania or North Carolina, The crowds keep getting bigger and bigger. Trump's advisors say they're no longer writing off Michigan, and there are $13.8 million in advertising reserves in the state, not far behind Biden's $16.3 million, reflect their commitment. Trump's aides are also optimistic about Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, and Minnesota. The race could ultimately come down to swing state suburbs, where many educated voters who have traditionally voted Republican have turned away from Trump's GOP. The shift has fueled gains for Democrats in state elections since he took office, yet Trump's team is betting that the focus on protest-related violence will scare some voters into giving him a second chance. The balance for Democrats between embracing the Black Lives Matter movement and criticizing violence aimed at police is particularly sensitive in Wisconsin. The state has emerged as a center for the nation's civil unrest, following the recent police shooting of Jacob Blake, a black man in Kenosha, and subsequent protests that sometimes became destructive. Trump was a regular presence in Wisconsin even before the unrest, while Biden made his first step of the campaign last week. Trump and his allies have also been a more visible presence in Pennsylvania, although Biden is catching up. The Democrat hosted a campaign event in the state on Monday, and both candidates plan to appear in Shanksville on Friday to mark the anniversary of the September 11 attacks. Terry Mitko, the Democrat Party chairwoman in Beaver County, one of the Democrat-leading counties in western Pennsylvania where Trump pounded Hillary Clinton in 2016, predicted that most Trump voters would not abandon the president. She expects some independents and many new voters, however, to support Biden. Still, she would like to see Biden emerge as a more visible candidate. In Beaver County, we certainly would like to see him down here, Mitko said. People are asking for that. On Tuesday, Trump visited Winston-Salem, North Carolina, a top battleground state that became the nation's first to send absentee ballots to voters late last week. Biden's campaign boasts that it's already made 4 million calls to North Carolina voters, while Trump's Tuesday appearance as one of a half dozen he or the vice president has made in recent weeks. The calculus for many voters is complicated as the nation struggles under the weight of the pandemic, the related economic fallout, and maintain or sustain civil unrest. Minnesota, which Trump lost by just 45,000 votes 4 years ago, offers a window into the nuanced debate. During a recent afternoon in Mayzata, Simone Metzdorf, a 52-year-old operations manager at an insurance company, conceded that she doesn't know which candidate she'll support. She cast her ballot for Trump in 2016, largely because she considered him, quote-unquote, the lesser of two evils, but she continues to think he's vulgar, too outspoken, and not appealing. She says the protests are unlikely to decide her vote. She's quote-unquote appalled by what happened to Floyd, but also 110% supportive of the police. Her husband's view of the Democrats is not ambivalent. John Metzdorf, a retired service technician, former Marine, and Republican, said that after Biden visited Kenosha, Democrats, all of a sudden they want to change their tune. People are tired of rioting, and all of a sudden now Joe Biden is out. And that's the end of the article. Now, we are just under 54 days away from the election, and I gotta tell you, things are slowly falling into place, though not as quickly as many would like. You know, like I keep saying, anything can and will happen. We've seen it. We had seen it in 2016 when Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, and we'll definitely see it more in the weeks and days to come. We all know that it takes 270 electoral votes to win the presidency. We also know that Right now, Joe Biden does have a considerable lead in the presidential polls, and there are some prognosticators that predict he'll get 315, or even that Trump will repeat and get about 330, or some even say that he's going to win in a major landslide. However, there's something that not many consider. What if neither Trump nor Biden get 270? In other words, what if they tie at 269, or on the off chance one of the third party candidates, either the Libertarian or the Green, happen to get some electoral votes? It has happened a few times in the past, and this coming from an article from the National Review by Alexander DeSanctis. What happens if neither Trump nor Biden wins the Electoral College? One presidential candidate would need to win a majority of the state delegations in the House of Representatives. In the event that neither President Donald Trump nor Joe Biden wins an absolute majority of votes in the Electoral College this November, the race will be handled with a constitutional procedure called a contingent election, which will send the contest to the House of Representatives for a final decision. The process for a contingent election was initially established in Article 2 of the Constitution and later modified by the 12th Amendment. As it stands, the Constitution requires the House of Representatives to go into session to settle the election if neither candidate has attained a majority. Under this procedure, the House must choose among the three presidential candidates who receive the most electoral votes. What's most important to note is that in a contingent election, the House doesn't cast its votes in the same way that it would decide on legislation. Instead, each state delegation must cast its vote en bloc, with each state receiving just a single vote allotted to the candidate who receives majority support in the delegation. In order to be elected, then, a candidate must receive an absolute majority of state delegation votes, which, given the 50 U.S. states, means he must receive the votes of 26 state delegations. Now it says 26 state delegations because, despite having a delegate and 3 votes in the Electoral College, the District of Columbia does not get a vote because it's not a state. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Although the Democrat Party currently holds a majority in the House, with 232 representatives, and the Republican Party's 198, the Republicans hold a majority of state delegations. In the current makeup of the House, there is a Republican majority in the delegations from 27 states. Now, of course, the composition of those delegates is subject to change in the coming election, and the newly elected House would be the one to settle the presidential election in the event of a tie. A contingent election for vice president, meanwhile, in which no vice presidential candidate achieves a majority in the Electoral College, would be settled by the Senate. Now in 1800, the U.S. faced one of its few contingent elections when Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr each won 73 electoral votes, John Adams won 65 electoral votes, and Charles Pinckney won 64 electoral votes. Now, this was when the Constitution required each Electoral College member to vote for 2 candidates for president and 1 for vice president, which means that the second place finisher became the vice president. Burr was understood to be Jefferson's vice presidential choice, and several people suggested that some Jefferson elector should cast his vote for someone else so that Burr would finish second. But nobody did. Now, when the state delegations of the House attempted to choose between Jefferson and Burr, it took 36 ballots for them to elect Jefferson. The first 35 ballots failed to achieve a majority, in part because House rules label as divided, quote unquote, any delegation that doesn't give a majority to either candidate, resulting in its vote being withheld from both candidates. By the time each time the votes were counted, Jefferson got 8 states votes, Burr got 6, and 2 states were divided. Finally, on the 36th ballot, a handful of representatives from the opposition Federalist Party relented and changed their votes, and Jefferson was elected. In past contingent presidential elections, the House has held its votes in a closed session, and the votes of each representative were never made public. However, a closed session is not required by the Constitution, and the House could decide to change that rule and publicize the final tally of votes. Contingent elections are rare, with only 3 occurring in the U.S. since the founding. In the House in 1800 and 1824, and one in the Senate to choose a vice president in 1836. Even though it's not entirely unimaginable, especially given the state of play in several battleground states, that this year's presidential contest could end up in the House come November. In addition to that possibility, there's a chance that the House will have to vote to resolve disputes over the certification of electoral votes. Now, because there is certain to be an increase in mail-in ballots this year, along with a higher likelihood of court challenges, close final vote tallies in some states could result in protracted delays or disagreements over the validity of the results. The newly elected House and Senate are always required to certify the Electoral College in January after a presidential election, giving congressmen the chance to challenge the results. Now, if any congressman does so, it would trigger a vote in each chamber on whether to certify the electoral votes in the disputed state or states. Unlike an occurring election, those votes will be conducted on an individual basis rather than by state delegation, a prospect that Americans of all political parties should hope to avoid. Now, it's interesting that this comes out, especially with the COVID-19 and most states going to a mail-in, or more voters deciding to vote via mail. And like I keep saying, a lot can happen between now and November 3rd, sometimes even beyond. I mean, remember what happened in 2000 with George W. Bush and Al Gore, how that election lasted until December because of the hanging chads in Florida. So should be interesting, and I'll be sure and keep everyone up to date as to what happens. Today, 19 years ago, and also 8 years ago, there were 2 attacks. The one 19 years ago to claim the lives of 3,000 innocent men, women, and children, which was perpetrated by 4 terrorists, a part of Al Qaeda. And in 2012, there was the death of 4 Americans, one of them an ambassador, and that was done by an Al Qaeda-like group called ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Korea, or Iraq and Syria. And we should never, ever forget those 2 days. As a matter of fact, I had written something last year uh, and posted it on the Patriot Soapbox website. It's entitled, Let Us Never Forget What Happened on September 11, 2001 and September 11, 2012. On this, the 18th anniversary, keep in mind about this last year, of the horrific attacks of September 11, 2001, allow me to post something which I started in 2006 and added to it 6 years later. Let us never forget what happened on September 11, 2001. I know I will not. In fact, I remember exactly where I was on this day when I first heard about the plane strike in the World Trade Center. I was at a McDonald's enjoying sports and listening to a local sports talk radio broadcast live from there when he broke for his 45 minutes past the hour break. I was about to walk over to him during the break and say that I wanted to speak on Michael Jordan's return to basketball to play for the Washington Wizards when I looked at his face, which is that of shock. At first report, it seemed to me like a small plane and that it was a freak accident. But when I heard of his second plane hit the World Trade Center, I knew that this had to be some sort of planned attack. I spent the entire 9 o'clock hour glued to his little broadcast station as he had a set of headphones which I listened to the producer back at the station speak to him and updating him. There were other callers who chimed in with updates from the televised newscasts. After the show ended, I hung around for a small time listening. Then the host dad offered to drive me to the college where I could watch the TV in the library as well as get current updates on the internet. While en route, I phoned my mom and stepdad to tell them what happened. My stepdad told me that he had heard about it and that mom was going to get me and tell me, but she saw that I was gone. When I went into the library at the college at first to watch the news, I almost fell to the floor upon seeing the plane striking the towers in the Pentagon. About 11:45, I got word that the college was closing and called my grandma in Chicago to ask her if she and Dad knew what was happening. She said that Dad was on the way to the store, but they knew what was going on. After I spoke to Grandma, I went home and kept the news on the TV all the time, gasping and getting angry as to what happened. I urge people to never forget what happened, or I urge people to never forget this day for as long as they live. I encourage everyone, no matter where they are, if they have the American flag, to unfurl it and wave it proudly for Franklin Delano Roosevelt instead of another terrible day in American history. This is a day which will go down in infamy. You know, it's amazing how 5 years later the horrific events of 9/11 still affects people. A lady who checked the terrorists onto that first flight that hit the towers killed herself because she couldn't deal with the guilt. Also, another checker who did a second flight is still 5 years later in intense therapy. This I had found out from a woman who I had seen a lot in a chat room where I visit often. I guess this is a lot like post-traumatic stress syndrome. Those words, written September 11, 2006, still hold true today. While the main proponents of the September 11, 2001 attacks are either dead or still in prison awaiting trial, we must not forget what happened that fateful day. We had been at war with Muslim extremists ever since 1784, when the first American vessel was seized by Moroccan pirates. That led to the formation of the United States Navy in March 1794, and us taking the battle to them. The Middle East has always been in the interest of the United States, as seen by historian Michael Oren in a speech given at Columbia University entitled The Middle East and the Making of the United States, 1776 to 1815. In fact, Oren had said that the Middle East's impact on American affairs is nothing new. Not many know or realize this, but it is true. The Middle East will always have an impact on American affairs, regardless of who is in the White House or who has control of the House of Representatives and the Senate. The only question is how the people in control of those offices handle the affairs coming out of the Middle East. Even though many people hate President George W. Bush, he knew how to handle the affairs out of the Middle East. In fact, if it were not for the intelligence and the protocols already in place, Obama would not have had the opportunity to order the death of Osama bin Laden. And I had written that and read that on air September 15, 2012. That's from my red. This is from my red and blue blog. 18 years after those horrific attacks, and 7 years after the attacks on the American consulate in Benghazi, Libya, I saw the deaths of 4 Americans, including the ambassador. It seems as though we have forgotten the events which had united us as one nation. Starting with the election of President, or starting with the election of Barack Obama as the 44th president in 2008, and currently with the recent elections of Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib to the House of Representatives in 2018. We are slowly letting those with either ties to Islam or those who sympathize with the Islamic culture to filter into our society and destroy it from within. The more we forget what happened, the greater the chances of it happening again. I, for one, will never ever forget those horrific events of September 11, 2001, and September 11, 2012, and will remind people why I am fighting and reporting like I am. You know, it's been a year since I had written that. Still holds true this year. I know for one, even with this coronavirus pandemic, and the fact that because of the because of the coronavirus, that the major celebrations uh, at the World Trade Center, at the Pentagon, and at Shanksville aren't happening. That being the endless or the countless number of family members reading the names of those who died. It seems like people are just forgetting what happened, just going on. I mean, as a matter of fact, the kids who were born in 2001 will be voting for the first time in a presidential election this year. I mean, it's just amazing how things are. The question we we all should be asking ourselves: Will do do we want to forget all that, or do we want to fight for what truly makes America what it is? And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Mick Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or two even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.